Yes, good afternoon. My name is Lynn. It is September the 19th. If you do come across this video by chance, just out on YouTube, or by referral or by share, I also will remark that it is also sourced back, hopefully on a GoFundMe site. However, if you find this on GoFundMe, I would recommend for the adjacent, also listed videos on YouTube by myself to support the content in this for further validation or food for thought, to look and go to YouTube and search said video under Lynn Johnson and my other videos. Okay, now the first thing I would like to say about this video is that often as far as readership and that, people will kind of come through and they say, well, it doesn't have the glitz or that. It's not really that good to watch. I'm going to go on, But at the same time, often when the presentation is too polished, this, that, and too absolutely stupendous and just too good to be true, quite often it is. That being said, I will not say that I am very too good at putting together polished videos that just keep people spellbound and hooked to the camera. However, at that time, I'm winging it. It's kind of like writing a song. I'm making it up as I go along, but the stuff that I'm going to provide are, in fact, evidences and conclusive, objective by scientific and other things with relation to laws and all those other things applicable, and I would hope you would take it to heart and give it some consideration as something to consider, as plausible and as believable. That being said, I'm going to go on at this point by giving you a quote to consider before you might consider or not consider moving on. The quote was by an 18th century English scientist and philosopher whose name was Charles Herbert Spencer. And Charles Herbert Spencer was also the fellow that coined the term evolutionary Darwinism, and as well as that, survival of the fittest. Further to that, he had a principle he was working on at that time with regard to called synthetic reality. He was going to come up with a contrivance of equations that actually explained reality. However, that being somewhat of an insight, in some regards, well, it didn't work out. But the variables, he was a good shot at it, but not quite. But at the same time, I decided, back having heard that, why would you not try to focus it down to things that you can actually perceive and analyze reality in kind of a set of basic math or referentials that are kind of conclusive or close to getting along and actually doing that, possibly living through reality and doing okay. Fair enough? With that, let's just say in some regards, I have. But for the time being today, I'm going to discuss something that relatively comes down to politics, which is inevitable in people's lives. Who's being polite to who or who's not, and as well as that, it does have some, let's say, religious connotation to it. Be in the thing as far as are we basically putting our faith or trusting in God, and thou shalt not kill, and all those angularities as far as God is nothing but love. Love, by definition, when referred to as Christ, Christ, in fact, by pure definition, does not refer to the human form. Christ refers to the divine light of love, which is thread through the heart and mind of all God's creation. Well, I did say mankind, but not to be exclusive, of course, womankind as well. That being said, we will consider the reference to Christ in that, and the divine moral code, which is not a religion. It is only a moral structure of some self-evidences that make kind of good sense. And so, on the basis of love, which is also not a religion, it is an emotion. and some of the common understandings as far as avoiding the seven deadly sins and some things like that. So, as I say, it's going to be a combination of political and religious. Oh dear, I said religious discussion. Well, shame on me. It is going to be a conversation about politics in terms of who's being polite to who or not, and for whatever reason. And the angularity is it in defense of a person standing on the principles and behaviors and moral justifications as far as interactions and governing or leadership or fellowship or service from from the point of view of on the God thing and the God values under the prevails of love, or are we going to deal with it under the prevails of perhaps state, the godless state, or perhaps the worship of a golden calf and the determinations as far as ruling authority that kind of detract or step aside from people's possibly God-given rights as far as free choice, freedom of thought, and go in peace, harm no one, or to those extents. And as far as to be judged, how much are you perhaps in contradiction or variation, or perhaps trying to circumvent the common and thou shalt not kill and good Samaritanism, and let's try and all get together and do things somewhat so we can all carry on down to the thou shalt not kill consideration. Fair enough? So we'll go on to this now. As well as that, over the years in the discussions as far as things, and always that ugly specter raises its head from numerous decades ago with regard to a term Nazi. Now, Nazi is often referentially branded in terms of defense of a particular religious or political posture, or or basically, unfortunately, victimized against perhaps some ethnic background as far as persecution or victimization. We'll take that out of the equation right now. I went and did a Google quite some time ago, but actually, curiously enough, although Nazi was an acronym that was popularized in the 40s, late 30s and 40s, unfortunately, by a socialist party. However, it was extremely to the right wing as far as some respects in terms of justification. Kind of a contradiction in terms, it was a real bad thing, no matter how you look at it as far as the outcome. Because as far as respect of other people's rights and freedoms and things, and thou shalt not kill, it did not go the way it was a contradiction of terms. The world collected together and put down those things and restrictions and treaties that one might hope that it would never happen again, and all the safeguards that it should and or really should. So, that being said, the definition of Nazi, several centuries old, is any person that basically, or any group, or any governing construct, that basically imposes some level of cruelty with regard to its governing or ruling of a people or a family or a group or an organization. Now, cruelty, in some regards, is an objective observation, but somewhat subjective. Now, is it a cruelty, or actually is it tough love to be kind that you're well, as I say, subjective, objective, but in the overall, let's say as far as good and evil, perhaps sometimes the choice is always the best to choose the lesser of the many evils, but in a tough love or a definitive love to protect the most in terms of a favorable regard, to be kind to the most of the favorable, in a favorable, uncruel thing as far as the overall construct, be it for commerce, society, interrelations, and rules between people as far as what you can and can't do, on the basis of human, genetic, and spiritual potentials that are innate, that can't be changed. You're born with them, and that's all there is to it. Again, with the arguments of existentialism against this, Frederick S. Perls, Carl Jung, Freudian, all these things. Well, essentially, most people growing up, and they say, formidably, children and things, and overall, the first numerous years are important as far as elementally instilling some levels of behavior for the ongoing. Yes, and as well as that, it has been noticed with animals and that and in humane society things as far as certain breeds of dogs, and I will refer to the Staffordshire Terrier is a very loyal and obedient and protective and a wonderful dog in the hands of the right owner. But subject to being protective and obedient in the hands of the wrong owner, it can get a bad rap because it trusts the owner and does what it does to protect the owner. And depending on the attitude of owner or demonstrations within the group or how well it's trained, can be the outcome of said dog or pretty much any other dog that's obedient in that regard. Okay, fair enough. As well as that with human beings, it has been shown in testing neuroplasticity. You can basically condition or brainwash or basically convince people by peer pressure, by being left out or wanting to be part of the simple psychological angularities that yes, you have the potential under certain of encouragement, of benefit and true benefit. You can encourage, like for example, a herd of cows. If you want the cows to come along, well, geez, you have a pail of drop or some food, and you say, here, girls, they follow right along. However, at the same time, if you're trying to encourage the herd to do something that's questionable, and you don't provide them the right reason to follow along, and all of a sudden you're trying to whip them and load them up into a trailer to take them off to to the stockyard or something, and something unnice in terms of the ongoing, well, at that point you got a rodeo and a lot of resistance. Human behavior all the same. So with that, I'm going to get on to the crux of this issue here. And at this point, as I say, if you find the link or go to my inventory and list of videos on YouTube, I would ask that you would refer to a video called "Living in a State of Living in a World of Flux," and as well as that, there's another one that I just recently put out in the last couple of days with regard to oh my gosh, well, at any rate. I've got a lot of things, so let's put it this way. You go out and have a look through some videos. Essentially, I've been in sales and marketing and a diversity of things for many, many years. If you wish to get back to me on my credentials and references and out in the back and what I have done in the past, by all means do so. I can provide those people to you. And as far as my credentials and things that I've done in the past, yes, I can back that up with substantiated and qualified credentialed references in the background. But here's the thing. What we're looking at today is the fact that I am appealing to you for a funding right now. And let's put it this way. Realistically, if you listen to this, the other videos, and that and conjecture, and yes, research, you might find in some real regard your personal freedoms and rights and opportunities and expectations in life might be in somewhat of compromise because of something that is apparently going on, and a lot of people come up with the discussion of conspiracy. A conspiracy is a group of people that are contriving behind the scenes or intermingled with a system or whatever to do something that is actually overall harmful to the population, or, dare I say, perhaps in a Nazi reference, a cruelty. Now, let's get something out of politics right now. Cruelty is not basically the ownership or the immediate victimization and finger pointing at any specific left, center, or right-wing group, or any moderate or extreme, or shall we say, what's the other word, fundamentalist group, in any religious aspect. Cruelty can come from any source if it is in fact the outcome is basically punitive or, as I say, a misrepresentation of expectations in a harmful regard. Walking a person down the garden path when basically it's supposed to be a walk down the garden path, and unfortunately when you take the corner you get the thorns instead of the nice bouquet of flowers. that being said, I am going to say that in the last, 4 or 5 years specifically, I've been paying attention to some events in the world that goes back to, here's the simple thing. There was an issue a few years ago that was announced, and essentially it was with regard to a vaccination program. Okay? Again, being a farm boy, and as well as that, having attended university, dealing in sciences and sales, act, react, stimulus response, human behavior, and things, and having a feel for things. And from a university thing, from scientifics, you always deal in something that is hopefully conclusive, unarguable, and proof based on fact. Fair enough? Well, the truth based on fact is, if you want to get the truth and you hear something that doesn't really quite add up, or you want to further investigate, you look for other evidences, and if there's not conflicting or other sides of the story, and that, what you do, if there seems to be a conflict of who's this, what, at that point, you decide out of who's talking out of the horse's mouth as far as possible truth, and who's trying to make you the other end of the horse by possibly hearing it from the other end of the horse and passing it on. What you do at that point is you go back to the barn or the origins of the stable and talk to the horse's mouth where the information came from. Okay? At that point, I conclusively found out the source of this mRNA substance by the doctor who released it through his medical review corporation into the public conclusively on a conference that I saw him conclusively say it was a military biological weapon designed to make people sick and sicker. As well as that, I also found other Nobel Peace Prize winners as far as the legitimacies and substantiations that, well, not Nobel Peace, but the Nobel Medical Award for his work in basically being the final objective word in validations of realities based on electron microscopy, who again do held account as far as supposedly the eminent experts and spokespeople that they were contradictions in terms and really should not be listened to. That's enough on this. We get back to the point. As far as reality and things, it's an either or, and pretty much either you were or you weren't. Either it is or it isn't. So at that point, I started addressing and basically sending considerate communications to leaders, people out in the corporate and that, excuse me, but with regard to this thing that I found out from the horse's mouth about what this mRNA is this not of concern to you? And at that point, in terms of people, whether it was concern or perhaps there was something up that really didn't make sense in terms of behavior and act react, well, there was no response. And as the further I went and investigated, the more it seemed that there was no response, or they were avoiding or cover up, etc., etc. Over the last 3 or 4 years, I investigated into different aspects of numerous other things, and I sent out a large group email to people through the time on a daily regular basis that kind of sourced in real time the evidence as it went on, and so that conclusively came back to obviously some things out there that they were trying to stand in the way of people having both sides of the issue. I will make some observations that are conclusive as far as arbitrary preferential censorship on social medias, and into relations back to kind of cold to this justification by state and looking the other way, and the legitimacies of what's going on with this vaccination program. Well, as I say, over the last 3 or 4 years, I put together a lot of things. I've been handing them off to authorities, police, you name it, in the background. And it comes up to some other things that come today that I'm going to quickly conclude on. But about, 2, 3 years ago, there was a thing on the national news about the exploitation and seems the unusual harassment of an ethnic group that was from another country. And they couldn't, because for unusual reasons, they were being found, and when they were basically, discreetly living, but as well as that, unfortunate things were happening to him and other people, and I've seen other incidences out in society since his putting together how is this being done as a possibility. And as far as that, contrivances, violations of bank security, unusual sequences that basically kind of make you go, coincidence? What's up? But as I say, and often as far as people that get victimized on things, the popularity of the day is this person is paranoid, they're suspicious, or they're delusional. They suspect that somebody is conspiring against them. But in truth of the matter, in a lot of cases, if you could know the whole truth, they're actually being objective in some regards. To bring into point at this time, I am an INFJ personality type. 1% of the population is consistently an INFJ personality type of the 16 basic personality groups. We have conclusively found we have a sixth sense. We're intuitive. Subconsciously, we kind of record and become aware of patterns and that and things and stuff, and all of a sudden, high level of intuition, and over time, it has been studied that on a much high percentage of the time, we're in fact accurate when we speculate or sense something, and when we get to the bottom of the conclusion is yes, these things are going on. So, with that, as far as people that kind of get brought in by paranoia or conclusions and that, I just wish to say that on some conclusive examinations and that, and conclusions has been heard out by qualified medical and psychiatric and psychological people. Excuse me, but the panel relatively consistently the last fall when I just put these things to them, and the real reality is it's always, yes, you're free to go, sorry for the inconvenience, you're fine, you're not a danger to anybody or anything, and you're relatively, we don't really say that you're paranoid, but at any rate, we'll go on to these things some other time. But as far as these things that collectively went on, and as well as that, back several years ago when this vaccination was going on, and please refer to the other video I just did yesterday. Oh my gosh, what's it called? Well, I just put, oh yes, something to the effect of things political, social, economic, personal, not adding up in this world, something to that effect. If you know the right equation, then it does add up. Why it doesn't? Something to that effect. At any rate, I'll put it in the text, the actual title of that video, when I put down the text, hopefully at the bottom of the GoFundMe site. But as I say, I may be blocked from being able to get into it, because conclusively, when I keep getting down to these things about these graphene particles and things from Harvard PhDs and all these things that say that something really unnice is up, and as I say, an intermingled conspiratorial thing that may well be going on, that has been trying to get to the bottom of for numerous decades. And then we'll go back to, I believe, 1983, when there was a gentleman on network news in the United States, I believe was it on 60 Minutes or one of the more credible talk shows in one of the three major networks, and I think the gentleman hit all three. But at that time, he was either an FBI agent or a CIA agent. And he came across a thing with some really unnice conspiracy thing going on. And when he found out about it, apparently those guys found out that he found out about it. And his best self-defense, he felt, was to write a book and to get on national television to explain himself so that, inside of self-protection, make other people aware in case, because if they really did try to do something unnice, then the red flags would go up and possibly they could check back through things and see where it came from. So I ordered that book in '83 by credit card and by name up at a place in northwestern Alberta. And so on we go with life. I came back, and certain things, in retrospect, in the last 4 or 5 years, I decided, well, I'm seeing some things, and it didn't really fall in the same strategy as that gentleman from the FBI, but just in broad things to get this word out, because I was not getting any response about these key things about why is this mRNA and vaccination and the truth of what it is being imposed upon us as something to save us or protect us, when there were so many conflicting and angularities of other things that said no, it wasn't. So my background is relatively a lot of things, but politics, well, you grow up in the world, you pay attention. And with this personality type of mine, well, I just happened to be in the right place over time, but I started sending out group emails to kind of let everybody know and get a discussion going. And things, but behaviorals over time and obvious contacts from said group, all of a sudden other things came into play. And then obviously there was kind of a notable by indicatives, a, a, a definitive thing to kind of frustrate my information getting out, because essentially it showed that there was possibly and potentially an unharmful, really unnice conspiracy going on, and what we were hearing was not the truth, and a kind of, well, here it is in the good news. In the end, as far as prime ministers, presidents, corporate leaders, etc., and as I say, a large political discussions on this side of the world, the far side of the world, intermingled with all the commonalities of that. And the reality of the situation is there is an indicative about a conspiracy in the background as far as somebody that is possibly trying to play God, but being a golden calf about it, and it's kind of out of control. And it's not basically in the respect of people's rights and the freedoms, or, a synergy as far as the collective of the overall, and we all carry on, and some sensible economic decisions to serve that, or political decisions, but possibly a situation as far as a competent, and no victimization on it, because numerous sources have these infrastructures in the background, but as far as artificial intelligence, computing systems, big budgets, participant in certain business angularities or world agendas and that, and profits and this, that, and the next thing. But what it comes down to, and the final conclusion is, there is a cruelty about it, and there is a harmful thing, and there's some aspect identifiable as an underlying external level of influence in a conspiratorial, harmful way, intermingled with the contrivances and participations unknown or under duress, or can't do anything else but by political leaders, and as well as that, innocent by people in professional and medical or perhaps other, as far as, that's what they were came to believe as far as a belief system, subject to their peripherals of input that they would analyze on. But they genuinely see that what they're doing is what they feel, and genuinely feel. Other people are doing what they have to do because they thought there's no way out, or maybe some financial thing, because let's take a guy that's in debt, and he's got to pay his payments, or he's got a wife and kid to feed. And some people in tight terms, then they say things, or they do things that are less than ethical, or a fast talk, or take the money to run, or whatever. Or the age-old story about the Jean Valjean, he stole a couple of loaves of bread because he had to feed his wife and kids, spent time in jail. Not really a benevolent or common sense moderate attitude toward how to deal with the social or political situation. The famous gentleman, John Deere, he escaped a debtor's prison in a contrived economic slowdown state of New York and jumped off to Moline, Illinois to get a new start in life. My great-grandfather, 1928, one of the richest men in Saskatchewan, tied in, eminently respected man, Liberty City, Philadelphia, Amish character, etc., up here, Well, one of the richest men in Saskatchewan, largest Aberdeen Angus ranch, flour mills, grain elevators, you name it, and whatever. Black Monday 1928. Well, no, he was probably doing something comfortable or genuine as far as what would be sound as, oh, who knows, maybe some futures or margins out of the Chicago lives. You just never know. However, he, back in those days, he rather much skipped town, left the family, and well, and the family was very well supported, and on since then ascribed and carried on in very respectable eminence and promotions and dignities within this country, aligned much closely with state government, crown, to law, and and as well as that, but apparently, and he did surface again, early 60s in an obituary. He had ended up in Alaska, where again, Philadelphia, his connections. Well, he ended up as the largest contractor to the Alaskan state government, military, and etc. in Alaska when he passed away. Family fortune, well, wherever it went, but as they say, that those things kind of get out of town, sort of things. Well, that happened, but essentially, as I say, I was doing well in life and things, but all early '80s, I was with a top, highly respected corporation and a job that I truly loved. It was a great dynamic. It was a Type Z corporation, and basically, I had taken like a fish to the water, but unfortunately had a very bad viral illness at that time. At which point, when I had got out of it, I was, throwing iron in that and being rather sturdy at that time. A couple of weeks later, I came out of the hospital, not very sturdy, and somewhat weathered the storm, kind of tipped my hat. Came home to the province of Saskatchewan, and for a series of 12, 14 years, somewhat, doing my best and spending a lot of time on the couch and just, well, as they say, 14 years later, in not very good shape of things I found out from a kinesthetic muscle testing thing that I had, in all likelihood, as they had speculated up there, caught a viral illness, but, back then, electron microscopy, all these things. I had somewhat been misdiagnosed and mismedicated, but I had been suffering an obvious, a chronic fatigue or a viral infection, be it Epstein-Barr, or it could have been, Epstein-Barr, or numerous of the others, or as they say, a residual, because I had become subclinical. And the proof of that was, well, I was spending 12, 14 hours on the couch, but afterwards the nutritionalist fellow says, we'll just give you some natural immune builders to strengthen up your immune system, and your body will basically finally totally fight off the virus, and you'll be well again. And the truth was, within 6 weeks, as opposed to being dead beaten at the end of 6 weeks, well, I was ready to go out instead of 6 weeks prior, and for several years, only be able to golf 9 holes on a cart and kind of be ready to do something the next day as far as sales or a bit of brochure work, and yet that I could handle. Or, say, for example, if I golfed 18 with my buddies on a golf cart, well, the next couple of days, I just didn't go out. But at the end of 5 or 6 weeks, well, everybody was, what's got into him? Because at the end of 5 or 6 weeks, I had a remarkable return to health, physical health and vitality in some regards, because, well, we do 18 holes of golf and that, and they were going home and say, fine, see you guys later. I'd go out and walk and do another night. And they're going, what's going on with him? Yeah, well, basically, the virus had been beat off. At which point, I got strongly into nutritional health, healing, and biologies and stuff, and advocate, and as always, what's going to make you well? I always, and as well as that, the age-old science, you always go to the objective, as much conclusive, and the horse's mouth for your sources, and the proof is in the pudding. If the picture sounds good and I take it, and it's good, well, fine, then it works, but okay, so, as I say, for the last 3 or 4 years, as far as this COVID, these graphene particles that are in the mind, or basically migrate, end up in the brain, electrosensitivities, and a whole bunch of things, And as I say, this discovery a couple of years ago, but how do certain countries find out about certain people that are sequestered away, and the technologies and the harassments and the turnarounds and the victimizations that go on? Well, I will conclude. Over the last 3 years, when I politely and concernedly started things, and yes, keeping track in live time and sending out sequences of audios and emails to group set emails, and things that kept coming back into my phone that have consistently over time, sequentially shut down my emails, showed indications, tagged the links and stuff, and on objective conclusions kind of showed that there was a concerted effort from authority and push or duress to kind of quietly keep me from getting the word out without identifying why or where it was coming from. And when I report these things, of course, for a long time, oh, don't listen to him. He's probably, oh, you can't believe him. He's got a possible mental thing, just rampant paranoia, blah, blah, whatever. However, I have found technologies and apps that can go into phones that essentially, as far as lifetime and observation and knowing where you're doing, and yes, what I'm saying on the phone right now, or in my text or emails, and at their leisure, have my passwords or anybody else's, or in group networks, and that. And it's, well, as I say, excuse me, but I have proven these things out, yes, and out in these group emails that have gone other places than that. As a lot of sophistications is how these people try to tag with artificial intelligence, as far as tags when multiple audios might go to different sources so they can tag and be there to kind of field or interrupt or alter or contrive the truth. And as well as that, get back to mind conditioning, or if you tell a lie often enough and convincing enough, the crowd will believe it, or under duress or fatigue or whatever, they will accept it as the truth. Or there are those situations in prosecution or arrest where some guy, he's got no way out as far as that, and what was it, decline something, and they put a confession out, even though it's not true, but it serves the case of prosecution and not the truth, because he's got no way out, and basically, well, if I confess to this, at least I stay alive, or I only get abused a little bit, as opposed to, boy, are you in for it. And, well, all these knowns, essentially, yes, I've been in sales and psychology and law and legalities and ethical marketing, spam, this, that, and the next thing for years and years. And, well, as I say, truth based on fact determination. When I see something up, I always go out, look for the horse's mouth, and I'll see observations, and I make observations, but I will not draw definite conclusions until it's conclusive, objectively, on a scientific, or as much as that, basis there is. So, but right now in Canada, and as I say, this somewhat gets the Prime Minister off the fault, because I do see that he's been victimized by all these things in the background to kind of put him in a situation that all of a sudden he's running laws and legislations as far as sociological behaviors and that kind of walk us off into the potential that kind of serves an unnice thing as an outcome for profits and preferentialities, and basically put out supposedly a conjecture or calculation about we've got to do certain things like, possibly mass depopulation or things contrived and held in with the New World Order as far as finding, certain sources in ties and official things from over in other political jurisdictions related to things and centralize, well, as I say, the determination that billions of people, as far as should not have the right to reproduce, or possibly a whole bunch of other things, is in fact on the books. However, you put these things out and you think, why is the news not hearing it? Why are specific things not? All of a sudden in our country, we're getting censorship and CRTC, when we used to be the bastion of free speech and that. We see arbitrary social media censorship on one thing that is basically enlightened to save people to make aware of something that's harmful, but at the same time, they stand or basically don't make anything when you see other aspects that are available as far as links through social media or Google or that are most detrimental to the sociological dynamic of peace and the stability of a family or a dynamic that's on common sense and peace and basically forgiveness and tolerance. And we're seeing things as far as prosecution or charges in this country because as I find out, the determination is really, with the publicly traded companies, the obligation to make more and more profits, and be it in the actual private corporate levels of the said institutions, but the support groups that feed off of it have to make more and more profits because of the reality of bank plus interest and debt usury systems, and the inevitabilities and outcomes of Keynesian economics. I won't get into those right now, but yes, I do know my stuff. And don't take the supposition that I don't because somebody else says, "Oh no, you can't believe him. We're the experts." Well, give us your side then, experts. Okay, we've got that now. We'll go check with this guy and we'll see what he's got, and we'll compare and we'll get down to who sounds like the horse's mouth and who's basically feeding us possibly, food for thought and truth based on fact and food for the soul and good for us, or basically as far as who's basically trying to make us not the horse's mouth but the other end of the horse by feeding us stuff that might come from the back end of a male of the bovine species or whatever, and make the determinations by finding out for yourself from sources that sometimes you can get the internet, but all of a sudden with censorship and indicatives that have been recorded in my phone, plus other things about a phone that was stolen from me that had some key things that it was becoming evident, and I was exposing and conclusively the evidence after the fact. I know conclusively who the group did have it that was trying to hide the information, but feedback and tip-off through cloud and that, and certain releases afterwards definitely exposed the source of some group that can be tracked that can get to it. But I suspect, as far as said, relatively independent Apple computers in the background and things, because they're not common to the other interrelated software systems that run primarily through other things like, shall we say, most of the large multi-billion-dollar corporations, social medias and that, and basically running on the old IBM systems as opposed to the Apple systems. And not excluded, yes, as I say, so we'll leave that all in the group. However, as I say, what it comes down to, folks, as far as mind control and things that and all these things that you might hear as far as broad claims or speculations. Yes, if you go out and watch that video called Living in a State of Flux as one, and as well as that, there's a couple of other supportive things in there. But curiously enough, back when I put that living in a state of flux thing as an exposure, plus these other things, all of a sudden the exploitation really got into a horrible runaround because three and a half years ago, when COVID had just come up, I started writing polite little, excuse me, but do you know this? And I kept connecting the dots. And interference and shutdowns became more and more. And I was cash flowing. I had a respectable credit rating. But all of a sudden, things started adding up as far as people saying this, or you put that out and the reaction wasn't this way, or that. Marketing things against known numbers. And again, as far as website marketing agencies and that, I worked for one of the most credentialed in Canada, not on size, but credibility. I also researched the best one in the business as far as large, and works on truth based on fact from gleaning out of a database of 400,000 clients as far as what the knowns are against certain wordings, certain strategies, certain demographic analysis, and all those truth. And you see that when some people try, they get the results. When other people try, they basically run into a brick wall. And when other people basically do something that's even less shoddy or not even the truth, all of a sudden the returns are astronomical on stuff that doesn't even sound like it's the truth, but all of a sudden, and as I say, meteoric rides of success in corporations and they overall don't basically stack up in terms of what their claims are, but nonetheless. So as I say, at the conclusion of this, folks, give me a call if you like. I will further clarify your credential. And yes, I do encourage that if you are a public official or a private person or a corporation or as they say, a religious person or somebody that says, excuse me, you just want to basically add to the conversation or wish to get a clarification about how would you apply this, I can give you bulletproof either-ors and referentials that you can see at that time that is in fact the case. Like, for example, exactly, over the years, act, react, and that. But unfortunately, I got victimized by, at the time that it happened, and maybe thank God it did. It was obvious that there was a setup and there was a scenario by said possible people at the top end about some things that I had been working favorably with the group for years and on a totally acceptable level, and getting acknowledgments and yeah, let's go for it because environmentally within the CO2, this is going to work. And we were really scaling up, and all of a sudden, the awareness went out. Curiously enough, all of a sudden, these other things that I proved that yes, I know I wasn't paranoid. Yes, these apps can do this. Yes, that can do that. All they need is this. Proving out to authorities and people in the background. And they kept getting back there. I said that realistic, they were trying to back, oh my God, they're onto us, or oh my God, I'm basically, I'm onto the gun. I got to keep this on because whoever really does have the gun to me, if I don't pull it off, kind of thing. Well, as I say, there was a situation where I was arrested under when I had done nothing wrong, probably the circumstances of the arrest. And yes, if it does go to court, I'm going to be pleading definitely not guilty, adamantly, emphatically, probably not guilty, and then it'll go to court. But as I say, on these things, I am just hammered on the first hour and a half when I sat down and thought and conferring on what I know about law, logics, and this and that, and provables and arguables on the objective. Well, excuse me, I had in the first hour and a half, shame on me, but I had 47 realistic points of examination relevant to the circumstances that it will expose exactly what's going on behind as the RCMP probably victimized or contrived or set up or duress, and a whole bunch of background informations that show these other cover-ups and dirty tricks and switch-arounds of algorithms and their artificial intelligences, well, are exactly what it is. And so, with that, if you might wish to give me a call at the very least, or contribute to my site, or call me first and decide whether you want to pitch in and spread the word on this campaign, and make some suggestions, I tip my hat. Is it for myself personally? Well, let's put it this way. I was cash flowing 3 or 4 years ago, keeping up, and all of a sudden, one thing started to happen to the other. And I was charged with something that had no legitimately, subjectively, or objectively with regard to my impeccable behavior against the misinterpretation or just because attitude of somebody on the other side that had nothing to do with any moral structure or rhyme or reason. It was just because. And my behavior wasn't even legitimate, and it was basically substantiated in the plaintiff's statement that my behavior was not there and they were not recipient of it relative to the claim on the charge that was the charge that I was charged with. Right? And in the end, as I say, truth we know in Canada, essentially prosecution goes at something in terms of are we going to be money ahead or money behind? Money ahead and on the cost of no. Money ahead in terms of possibly whose reputations or who's got the money on, or similar to, sometimes the judging for the ice dance competition is done beforehand. Because, the promos, the sponsorship, the big end and the big promotions that they have public and the whole law and sporting, it's already been set in place. Most notably, one time when they fell miserably in the final performance, but nonetheless, they still finished first because that's they were the favorites before. Well, we won't go into that right now, but we all know that sometimes It's not who you know or what you know, it's who they've got the money on, and no matter what the odds or what the outcome is, the money is on the people that are going to go with the side that's already set up to make the profits, and that's the way it goes. So, all right, so, and we know this to be true, but so as I say, as far as mind control, certain things, go ahead, look out in the the other videos I remarked. And as far as these speculations about political fires or whatever, or real fires or potentials, and well, prior to me sending out the last audio, I realized by something the speculation this day, curiously enough, I had a car that broke down, a car on a back road one night, and subject to the preliminary experiments, the preliminary circumstances around that. I was wondering, did somebody light that on fire? Is somebody immediately not being, well, as I say, by the assurances of mechanics and experts, don't worry if it was deliberately lit away. They'll find out, and even if it wasn't, they'll probably even know what started or where those Red Seal guys get to the bottom. At any rate, SGI, they went through it. I got my insurance claim, but in the last couple of years, and then coincidentally this morning, a guy came up with a conversation. I kind of go back and this and yes, and antennas and convergent and other things. Well, and the real reality of these things about flux and the antennas wide open and capacitors and vertical downshots, as I mentioned in the other video. Is that possibly what happened to my car? Because it could have been done. There would have been no indicative of trace chemicals or pyrotechnics, but it certainly could do it. And yes, as far as physics, quantum physics, the whole yeah. Unfortunately, I'm a polymath. I've worked in engineering industries over the years and other things as a sales rep and on the ethics and kind of my insatiable interest in finding out what the truth is and based on fact for ethics. So I can tell people truth based on fact, what it is on the basis of what it is. And as far as different angles of engineering, physics, buildings, essentially, or if it's a new aspect of some physics application, okay, give me the overall, fine. Plug in, here's the basic rules, okay, fine. And I'm up and running and up to speed in very short order. So, as I say, all of a sudden, as far as political fires or real fires, I'm not meaning to try and put fires out. And it is not in a political or a corporate or a personal gain point of view. It's just to kind of get things real, because there's a lot of things going on in this world right now that are chaotic. And in terms of the reality, they're becoming more and more chaotic. And it kind of possibly is obviously to serve possibly a cruelty or a conspiratorial interworking by external forces that are supposedly sitting back running possibly the obvious persons by conclusion, possibly them or those by victimization. If they don't get this wrong, they're in trouble by some external source, they're kind of under a duress or whatever. And, well, they got a niceness of possibly some level of terminal behavior or something. Well, as we know, there have been frame-ups and unusual things or people disappearing over time, but that kind of goes on in this world, and we all know this is a reality. So as this reality is 4 years ago that I'm down and ran around with all these contrivances of bank things, and in my own area, all of a sudden I'm looked upon as a dirty dog when I was fine up until a few months ago, when it really got bad when those other videos came out, and I came up to connecting all these dots. But essentially, the age-old game, and this has been known in theory and in practice, that the easiest way to start a real antagonism or a real chaotic exchange of things that can just basically get worse and worse, as you have the source of a person with the thesis, and then you have the antithesis. And at that point, you get in media, or you get the discussion, and you frustrate, and you never allow it to be truth, or concluded, or basically if the thesis that might be harmful against the antithesis, which gets ratty but keeps getting kept quiet, and all of a sudden you have a real confrontation, or you have a mind control or a way to control the crowd that is justifiably upset, so they can possibly all be sorted out, loaded up on the cattle trailer or whatever. And the cruelty aspect, which is the thesis or possibly the eminent credentials on misrepresentation or contrivance, are again mind control, and by these realities walks away and pulls off the game, much in counter to things, because right now the conversation and consideration is, do we have enough in this world to support and feed ourselves moving forward? Well, the argument or the conclusions or whatever that they put in place against what they've got to do to make it realistic so the long term can keep going. That is the thesis. Possibly an honest conclusion in terms of what they were thinking, or deluded by their short or narrow spectrum of reference and the total inclusions of what's capable, against the group that I have been working with that includes former academics like the former head of the United Nations Environmental Council from many years ago, PhD in physics and biophysics education, other PhDs more in what's there? Oh dear, ecologies, farm systems, dynamics, light waves, radionics, and stuff that a reapplication and at the approval and kind of acknowledgement of large banking families and large eminent things and observations by other objective people in different countries against that are choosing that that is a better way to go against a certain thing that's basically being held in place by the World Economic Forum in conjecture or misrepresentation or duress or whatever against numbers and banks or profitability. Well, essentially, the antithesis our antithesis against their thesis or the affairs that we're moving on with these things that, that are contradictory, like 30% cuts in fertilizer when it's a symbiosis process of that type of fertilizer, and they're complaining about a shortage of food in the world, but they're shorting out the ability for farmers to grow. I'm not going to get into those details, but the people who supposedly have credibility on basis of thesis and possible contrivances to cover up the truth against the people on antithesis that have something prevailing that actually proves contradictory and actually benefit, because the truth is against scientific models. The reason the group I was working with and heading up on some basic conjectures, which I have been in environmental, and I have credentialed academics and politicians over the years and litanies of things that, truthfully, as far as the world, we can turn the world around, get rid of our pollution and our waste and our toxic waste, and restructure against fixed costs, the environmentals and that. And basically, a hydrocarbon industry is not the cause of global warming. CO2 rising is actually a reaction to the things that are causing global warming. Some what they're doing is actually the cause and contributing as far as technologies to global warming, blah, blah, blah. But draw no conclusions where or why, but down for the last 3 or 4 years since I started connecting the dots and showing these things, and the last several months or years since that other thing came out, all of a sudden my cash flow, weird things, all of a sudden people are reacting in my community where I hadn't been communicating or discussing or involved in any political discussion for years, and I was just dum-de-dum kind of hanging out and doing whatever, always listening, and no, but at any rate, things started to happen. One thing led to the other. And all of a sudden, my cash flow stopped, and it came down to all of a sudden, things weren't working out, and instead of cash flowing and having a credit, well, it came down to now that I'm staying at a buddy's place, and, well, I had contrivances as far as bank extractions and things of that up as far as connect the dots that kind of lead conclusively back to some people that are either the part of the masterminds of this conspiratorial kind of aberration, external, integrated, looking like they're credible in that, or, as I say, they got out of the road and, well, or whatever, but essentially, it's down to the point that my emails, 4 separate emails, are shut down, basically, and etc., etc., and now that I can't even send out an email for no reason at all, and my texts, and my phone calls, the other things, the circumstances, and the feedback says that essentially And the truth is, I was putting it out. And as far as feedbacks and triggers and little things by popping, or repeats as far as social media and things, I can kind of see who's victimized, who's kind of favoring that allows my stuff to get out, and who isn't, or basically setting up kind of subtle things like stay on the right track. It's getting out. We're sending you this. But as I say, yesterday I sent something out, and all of a sudden, curiously, kind of caused the reward. But a couple of sites, all of a sudden, I can't tag things to social media links and things, and I don't think it would be the determination of them, because I proved the thing as far as the big hiding place, or possibly the ownership kind of gun to the head, or influence, or whatever. Well, all of a sudden, a certain well-known business-related website, I can't tag and link on them. One of my accounts that was wiped out, curiously, in the last day. I can't basically tag and upload to by some things on my phone, as far as tag and link and upload certain things to other social media things today. Curiously, all of a sudden, those icons are in absence in my phone that are always there before. And so, draw your own conclusions. So, if this is actually allowed to get up on a GoFundMe site, I will guess a concession that in the overall people in the background, what I'm saying is everybody's kind of hoping that some word gets out from somewhere, so we can all kind of collectively save our asses from possibly some diabolical source pattern that has nothing to do with God, or religion, or Christian, or Islam, or Hindu, or Confucius, or anything. It has to do with something godless or external, as far as the psychic victimization between the human mind and all these things, and technology, as far as artificial intelligence computers, and it's kind of got out of control with a mindless, godless computer, or possibly some ruling psychology in the background that is quite diabolical, wanting us to worship some eminence or credibility of golden calves that sound too good to be true, or sounds pretty good, and you can't see that otherwise, and the people that show otherwise don't get hurt. Draw your own conclusions. But if this gets up there on YouTube, I do hope that perhaps you will take the time to listen. In the meantime, I thank you very much, and I respectfully appreciate you for the respect you've given me for actually listening this long. And with that, I guess that's that's it, and that's a wrap for now. And as I say, we hope it all works out so that we can show these things, basically sort out and put some commonality, sensibilities. So yes, we can have a realignment and settling down as far as things, so it's fair to people's countries' rights, and yes, our charter of right, because essentially we have a charter of rights and freedoms in this country. And for years it was, but then there was legislation, the contrivance, that says it's kind of a subjective thing. Recently, there was an eminent psychologist who is always respectable, but in the kind of in contradiction to something that has no real legitimacy, but from a subjective, well, just because, a collection of judges basically said he is not going to allow to be defended himself on a constitutional basis, under a constitution that says we should. And that happened to me personally, too. Well, as I say, so we live in a country where we're defended by Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but things in a supposedly democratic country, as well as that, the New World Order many years ago has most of the planks of a Karl Marxist communist manifesto cleverly interwoven into our Constitution and adopted by the Parliament back in the early 80s or whenever, and most of the democratic institutions of the Western world. But excuse me, but we're coming up to a situation now we don't have rights under our charter, truthfully, and as well as that, we're kind of getting rules put down, well, just because, and we're getting censorship, and we're seeing all these alignments that is not good for anybody's peace of mind, overall rights and freedoms, and all the things that we come to believe in, or we're getting deceived or brainwashed, or if we're not basically just shutting up and do as we're told, well, you're really going to be in trouble. Well, essentially, I'm somewhat in a level of, as they say, victimization, or possibly because I'm down to the point, and as yes, interference is all of a sudden my pension's been cut back, my bank things, I get e-transfers stolen and things, and I'm down to, as they say, living on next to nothing. Had to sell out and stuff when 3 years ago I was just always swapping and trading and making money and stuff, and as well as that, there's these popularities about, the debit, we're just going to go all electronic money, ruled by computers, so you don't know what's happening out there. You can't get to the truth. You have no rights, and we're talking about transparency, but there isn't. You're questioning about the election results when it's in computers and algorithms and things that can be changed and this and that, as opposed to paper, so you can see what it is. And they're saying money and currency, well, as they say, a lot of contradictions in terms. Doesn't sound as appealing. It doesn't make much sense to me in terms of keeping things real and allowing our society to operate on open discussion and on sensibilities and for the philosophizing around a coffee shop or things, because now there's laws that says you can't basically make observations or hold people to account on the new law because people in government are guilty of those things, and they don't want to talk about it, and all of a sudden the legislation's in, so they can't be held accountable, and it's totally in violation of common decency, charter rights, or the ability to have a discussion to basically make some things better and solve some problems, because some central or whatever basically wants it that way. I'm not going to conclude that, but essentially, as far as that None Dare Call It Conspiracy book written in '83, I was keeping track, and essentially, as they say, as far as the New World Order and essentially one world government, that's a monopoly, as well as that, a conspiracy, if you can conclude that it's interwoven and a conspiracy is harmful to people, well, excuse me, and the cruelties and things that we're seeing as outcomes as far as contrivances and plays on contrivances as far as supply chains and upheaval and unemployment and all these things, and essentially that is pretty harmful, and it causes a lot of stress and a whole bunch of things, and all these truths that substantiate the folks. We should have a discussion, and if anything else, if you don't want to contribute to my fund, please give me a call, because as far as consulting or showing you who or what to look for to see if this is going on with you, well, it certainly went on with me to an extreme extent, and being run around and treated like a dirty dog, and showing up in a small town, and within a day, all of a sudden, punks or somebody's basically coming and telling me to get out of town. And what had I done? Nothing. I had been sending emails to the rest of the world, but the influence all the way back down. And as well as that, as far as observation or surveillance, I know it wasn't by Canadian authorities or ICMP or that, because if they are and doing that, I would have had to been specifically allowed to be communicated that and let me be aware of it. None of those evidences are there because they don't exist, but I've shown conclusively how all these other things are happening, and it might be a wonderful enlightenment to politicians and businessmen and religious leaders on both sides of the issue of whether one person is right or what's going on. Because essentially, as far as external influences, as far as outcome of elections or undermined things, as why is this happening and why are people doing it, would provide an explanation, and if anything, is the evidence of responsible leaders and good conscience, as demonstrated on the overall, life experience and things and the positions, regardless of the politician, regardless of the side of the fence, at least in this country and continent and corporate. And the fair thing to do the best for his people or his body or his work or his corporate is to do the best for them, to basically allow them to have, and then we all carry on. But there's so many other things. So, as they say, I'm only here to suggest. I'm not going to judge. Well, I judge not lest ye be judged, but there's always two sides of the story. But in the end, it's subjective. Let's be objective in this. In the objective, it should really basically rule on the person that's closest to the innocence or the truth in terms of the common sense of, humans' rights and dignity as opposed to as to otherwise. So, good conversations. So give me a call. I don't care who or how or what unnice or nice or objective things I have said in the past. Get a hold of me. I'm here to help because anything that can kind of help improve everybody's common position in some regard, in a collective or a cooperative or a competitive regard, and the benefits as they apply, I would be most happy to give you my insights or my observations. And if you give me this, I'll give you the things so that if you want to go find it, you can go find it yourself. I have no ego. Many minds are better than one when we all put our heads together to kind of help keep carrying on. And all I can say is what happened to that old headspace many years ago when I was growing up. And things were pretty much that way when we were believing in peace and love and harmony and world community village and everybody kind of getting along on that. And, well, dare I say, if we might, in the imaginations of our mind, have a special moment in theory and thought, well, there's not many Alice's restaurants left, but Arlo Guthrie said, I can't help falling in love with you, sort of thing. Well, as I say, if there still might be a thought or an imagination of an Alice's restaurant, well, we'll confer, or you can have an imagination, have a cup of coffee, look at my other videos, and if it kind of points you in the right direction to either help conclude and get those conspiratorials, or kind of get those guys that have kind of got a little off and basically diverted off into some bad direction, and they seem to be in positions where they're going to carry it off, and they've got because they're hell bent that they got to carry it off because if they don't, they're such victimized because everybody knows exactly what they're up to. That, oh my God! So, but as God says, everybody does what everybody does in order to survive. So, in that regard, in order to survive, I would say we would identify if you're part of it, fess up, be truthful, be accountable. And as I say, as far as the forgivable, and thou shalt not kill, and a tolerant and a moderate attitude, if the explanation is explainable, as far as whether you were deliberately or aggressively or a victim of circumstances, you will be judged accordingly. At least we used to be in this country, in the United States, but who knows, maybe the oligarchs and the mind control. Well, let's all be wary. But in the meantime, if I do go to court, it is going to be quite the embarrassment, because for those people that are trying to charge me with something I'm not guilty of, when, as I say, I have got so much evidence that I'm sorry. Are they ever going to be embarrassed? And anybody that might be interested in helping me going for everybody's best interest and keep everybody going, as far as some intellectual properties and yes, in excess of around $200 billion of planned staging projects that just go on, and as far as an opening up of nothing short of, I don't know, $250, $300 trillion in new industry that'll save the planet and that. And of course, they'll basically can restore the health of the oceans and forests and dynamics and carry on to it based on fact. And don't believe it's not true until you might talk to those people and those multi-billionaires in those high places that are wondering, what in the heck has happened to me, and why are all these coming, and why are all those other people all of a sudden making up stuff or contriving supposed realities that aren't true to say, my God, what a horrible, awful person. I'm not, but shame on me. But hey, I'm a lover, not a fighter, but judge not lest ye be judged. Well, I might judge that we should have an open-minded discussion, because all these people that are kind of don't want to talk about it, and a lot of people are trying to hold them to account, and there's more legislation so they can turn their back and run away and take the money or go hide. Well, as I say, you want to talk? Fine. Let's do it in an open forum, a discussion or whatever, or an investigation, or etc., etc. And as I say, the CIA, FBI, RCMP, political offices, corporations, fine. You want to challenge me or discuss me or support me or whatever. I have no fear of basically sitting and discussing and exchanging and basically qualifying that I will defend my positions on truth based on a fact and be held accountable for what I might be guilty of, which is, and I might be guilty of. I don't go for nonsense because I grew up on a farm and I'm kind of a watchful old hound dog. And as far as keeping an eye out for strangers, being nice to the ones that are, or whatever the friends, and looking out from, or looking out for my family, a man or whoever, and essentially that's about it. But as far as any real accolades or any eminences in my life or whatever, or actual certifications and stuff, I have some things that say I do know what I'm talking about. But maybe less notably for the sake of fun, for the and humor on the end of this, because there is a situation that is not very humorous out there and a lot of gravity behind, unfortunately. But for the time being, let's just say that as far as this old hound, I won Best in Breed at the last Westminster's Kennel Club show for the watchful old flea-bitten, grumpy old hound class. And, well, yes, Best in Breed. So, please don't read anything into that. I'm a moral Christian man. And if that might have happened, it would only be in an honorable, polite and honorable regard, and in no compromise to a woman's Christian dignity, and from one end to the other. And, well, as I say, I do my best to basically defend on what I am, but I don't know. I might offend somebody for basically still respecting people and being polite and considerate and not compromising a woman's real dignities or rights or things. But if she might be offended by the fact that I'm ignoring her because they have nothing to contempt for somebody that basically figures they might have some rights or opinion of their own that's worth defending in light of the truth in times of perhaps, well, excuse me, in the interests of some more humor and self-preservation, I prefer not to keep company with them. But if I might be attacked politically in some, I believe I might have the right to responsibly defend myself, or if not defend myself, explain myself of having innocence, and that they might at that point not confer or concede that I might be right. Well, they can always save face by forgiving me, but whatever the case. But please forgive me if I've offended or concluded or hopefully captivated your information to give some further investigation, because as Charles Herbert Spencer said, there is a principle in life which is a bar against all information and can be used as proof against all arguments. And that principle is contempt prior to investigation. And so, there is a principle in life there is a principle in life which can be used as a bar against all information and can be used as proof against all arguments and cannot fail to lead to a life of everlasting ignorance. And that principle is contempt prior to investigation. So, I might be offensive, I might be saying things that anger you from telling you the truth, but I'm not trying to be ignorant, and basically, I have investigated, and yes, in ethical regard, I'm trying to share some things for the overall common good so that we can sort some things out, and everybody can be happy, and we can all move on. But in the meantime, I wish you my very best regards.